seconds.
Grant, I heard something about John Carpenter's files. What do you know about that?
Okay, this is a very, very controversial story. Bob Bigelow has been scooping up everything he could in terms of UFOs to try to figure out the mystery. And one of the things he bought was what were called the Carpenter files, which are, I think it was 143 files, and they were files from John Carpenter, who had done a number of regressions of experiencers, I guess in the 80s, the 90s, and he sold these 143 contactee or experiencer files or abductee files to Bob Bigelow, which created a huge controversy because the experiencers are usually very sensitive to the fact that they don't want people to know that they're experiencers, and they're very sensitive to who knows, and then to have their files sold to a businessman in Las Vegas created quite a stir. And I think he paid $14,300. Now, Bob didn't have any, I don't think, evil intention, because he'd bought up all sorts of files. He had the FAA files. He bought up files from various researchers. He bought up Canadian government or Canadian groups files, UFO investigator group files, and he was just gathering all he could to try to put this story together. The Carpenter files created quite a stir, and the key thing to that is Bob Bigelow realized, as everybody should realize, that experiencers have a lot of extremely important information in their heads. If you want to understand the UFO phenomena, you have to understand the experiencers. That the experiencers are being given highly technical material. They're being given downloads. 42% have downloads. 40% at some point during their experience say they knew the answer to everything in the universe. And so it would make sense that you want to find out what did the intelligence, what did the aliens say to the experiencers. And it's been gone on since the 1960s. There was a study done by Douglas Aircraft where they had a regressionist, and they were looking at experiencers, and they were asking the experiencers, did they show you technology? Did they show you how the craft worked? And we just did an interview that went up on my Whitehouse UFO YouTube channel from Melinda Leslie, who is the top authority in the world on MILABs. And this is the question that I posed to her, is the fact, why are the MILABs taking place? Why are they so interested in these experiencers? And she basically stated that they're interested in consciousness, the connection to consciousness. They're interested in technology, because they know that a number of people have been shown technology. So when somebody has been abducted, and then they are re-abducted in these military abduction scenarios where the military grabs them, the military is asking them, did they show you how the craft worked? Did they make you levitate things? Did they teach you this kind of stuff? Because they know these the two key components is technology, because military is national defense, and national defense is always going to be about an enemy. Whether you have an enemy or not, you have to pretend. You've got to make sure that just in case there's an enemy out there, it's an alien, it's a Russian, it's a Mexican or whatever it is, we have to be prepared. So you want to develop the technology. You want to get this high tech, and whoever controls this technology will control the world. So they're very interested, because these experiencers are being shown technology. They're being told what's going on. So it's very important that we look at this. So what happens is, he buys the Carpenter files, and then we see later on that Tom DeLonge goes to the FREE organization. And FREE is the Foundation for Research into Experiencer Encounters. And it was started by Ray Hernandez and Mary Rodwell and Apollo 14 astronaut Edgar Mitchell. And what they did is they took the same premise, that we're a support group for experiencers, but the question is also asked, did you, during your experience, get shown technology? Did you get stuff? And 42% of all experiencers say at some point that they have material, scientific, mathematical, or technical material in their head that they did not learn in school, which implies that they got it from the intelligence, that they were given this stuff. So what they're doing is they're doing the same thing. They're saying experiencers are important. They are the key to the whole understanding the mystery. What were you told? What were you shown? What did you experience? What did you feel? And there's 600 and some odd questions that these experiencers get asked, trying to figure out what they know. And so Tom DeLonge went to Ray Hernandez and he basically made an offer that he would fund the Free organization. He would pay for the researchers that the Free Foundation had, and that they would operate as an investigation arm of the Academy, the To the Stars Academy. And Ray Hernandez said it's a non-profit. We are not going to. We're not here to make money, and we are not going to allow anybody access to these files. The files are the property of Free, and they're using them to do what they think is proper. And I applaud them for not allowing these thousands and thousands of files to fall into the hands of a business person or to Tom DeLonge or whatever. These are the key people. I say, if you want to understand the UFO thing, and Tom DeLonge has said this, it's all consciousness. So Tom DeLonge said, Skunkworks said, it's consciousness. That's the key. All the guy wanted to talk about was consciousness. Bob Bigelow started a chair for consciousness studies in the 1990s at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. He put up, I think, $3.7 million for a chair on consciousness studies. He knows consciousness is a key to this whole thing. Ben Rich mentioned consciousness. Dr. Eric Walker, former president of Penn State University, said, unless you understand about ESP and how it works, you will not be taken into the control group. Very few people understand. The Canadian government mentioned it. Jim Semivan said this has got to do with consciousness. Consciousness, and the only way you're going to get that sort of stuff is go into the experiencers who are being trained in consciousness, who are being given the answers. How does consciousness fit in? What's it all about? They will talk about quantum physics. They'll talk about consciousness. They'll talk about how reality actually works. This is where it comes down to. This is the most important stuff. It is not the hardware. It is not the files. It is not the videos. It is the experiences. It is this key study that is being done inside the Bigelow organization. And whoever's funding it, congratulations to them for doing it. This is the most important work, is to deal with experiencers who are interacting not with the UFOs, but with the intelligence behind the UFOs.
All right, and I think that's one of the most important parts of this. You know, I've been hearing for quite a while now that it's all connected. I hear this everywhere. You know, TV, media, shows. It's all connected. Everything's intertwined, and it looks like that's exactly what's going on there. These guys realize that mental phenomenon and consciousness are the key aspect to this phenomenon. And everything from poltergeists to ghosts to cryptids, UFOs, it's all connected. And these guys know this, and they're looking into it, possibly trying to reverse engineer some of this stuff and use it for propulsion systems or new technologies, right?
Yeah, or use it for weapons. Because, I mean, it's the idea that it's quite obvious. I mean, like the Canadian government's mentioned in 1950 that mental phenomena, they were told by the Americans, UFOs, flying saucers are real. It's the most highly classified subject in the United States. Small group headed by Dr. Vannevar Bush trying to figure out what's going on. It's of tremendous significance to the Americans, and mental phenomena is involved. So they were told this, and that was before any contactees came forward and any experiencers came forward. And therefore, they knew somehow that consciousness was part of the flying saucer phenomena already in November of 1950. And how would they have known? They might have known because if they had a recovery at Roswell and they had a live alien, a lot of the stories with Roswell talk about a live alien who is telepathic. So if you're the CIA and you see aliens talking in people's heads, you go like, wow, would we like to be able to do that? And that's why I say MK Ultra started. Not because they wanted to do drugs or they wanted to, mind control people. It was they're looking for the whole thing of controlling consciousness. How does consciousness work? Because the North Koreans were capturing American troops and they were brainwashing the troops and doing this kind of stuff. And they realized that the mind was the ultimate weapon, that if you could control the other guy's mind. So you have these technologies where you see the consciousness thing, where you can get inside somebody's head, where you can basically control people, do all this kind of stuff. So that's, in terms of the military, you're going to get the weapon type stuff. The more spiritual stuff is the whole idea that you talked about, the thing that everything's connected. That's how they get here. You're making all sorts of assumptions about a physical world that really isn't as physical as you think it is. Consciousness is the primary element to the universe, and that's why the CIA, it's always been rumored that this is called phenomenology. They know it's all like that's when the CIA released the files 2 days before Barack Obama left office. When they released those files, they released the UFO and the remote viewing files. It's all the same thing. The same as Ray Hernandez, who started the Free Foundation, had an experience. I was meeting with him in Florida. I gave a lecture on consciousness. About 2 or 3 days after that lecture on consciousness, Ray Hernandez is driving down a freeway in Miami, and he gets a download. He's sitting there in a traffic jam, and suddenly he said, suddenly I'm there, there's beings, and they have this like a big wheel, like a big roulette wheel, and it's spinning. And I'm sort of in the middle of this wheel, and the beings are looking, and on each of the spokes of this wheel that's spinning, there is remote viewing, psychic phenomena, near-death experiences, all this kind of stuff. And basically the concept that he clearly got was the same idea. And we are parsing all this stuff, that we are putting it all together, and we're saying there's remote viewing, and then there's channelers, and the channelers say, don't let me in with the experiencers, and the experiencers say, don't let me in with the channelers. It's different. It's all the same thing. It's all the same phenomenon. It's this understanding beyond the physical world, this consciousness phenomena, and that if you stop parsing it and putting it all together, and that's why you get certain things that are very important in the experiencer data that is shown by Free. For example, the Free data shows that people who claim that they've had interactions with the intelligence behind the UFO phenomena, of those people, 35% say they've had near-death experiences. And the question is, how do these people have 7 times the national average when it comes to near-death experiences? And you start to look, it's all connected. It's all the same thing. And it's probably not a random event. So they chose to be an experiencer, and they chose to have a near-death experience. It's not random. But you see, as you go along, that all this stuff is basically connected. So you get the Free survey where you've got like, whatever it is, 80% or whatever, it's a very high figure of people who are saying the aliens are telepathic. You get this telepathy. You get this downloads, you get all this kind of stuff. The craft is moving from one point in space to another. They're going through wormholes, this technology that you can bend space and move, and that aliens can be little balls of light. They come in, they become aliens, and they go back and they become little balls of light. So the question is it a ball of light or is it an alien? Is it physical or is it in another dimension? And the consciousness thing opens up these other dimensions. It shows that the paradigm of the materialistic world is flawed. Something's wrong with the idea that everything is nuts and bolts, and we're just random biological robots in a meaningless universe.
Wow, Grant, that's amazing. You know, I remember you mentioning that, like in 2013, I heard you on a radio show, and you said, you know, you're talking about your download and how consciousness is directly involved. And I was quite blown away by that. I was like, wow, this is really interesting. I go, what is Grant on about? You know, what's he talking about? You know, I've been really interested in everything you've had to say since then. And Grant, wow, I got to say, I'm really impressed. And thanks for allowing me to pick your brain tonight.
Yeah, well, let me just add one more thing, because you mentioned the download thing, because this is something that I'm putting a series on Whitehouse UFO YouTube, and we put a couple of them. And when I had that download experience, I didn't ask for it. As I said quite clearly, I couldn't have cared less about consciousness in 2012 when this happened, and I probably couldn't have spelled the word, and I couldn't have cared less. So when I had this experience, it came with absolute certainty. It was like, you don't have to check this. I knew this is how it worked. It was absolute certainty. But when that happened, when I gave my first consciousness lecture about what I thought there was a connection, and then I really didn't fully understand it as much as I think I do now. I was approached by a woman by the name of Pam Dupuis. And what I wanted to mention this for is because we are now starting to put these people on YouTube. So people can go to YouTube, and I've got a series of about 6 people. Pam Dupuis was the first one that came to me in 2013 in Phoenix, Arizona. I didn't know why I was supposed to talk to this woman. She came to a house where I was staying. She was in her 70s. And it was at one point where she was talking about remote viewing, and she's an experiencer and all this kind of stuff, when she said, oh, and I was flying the craft last night. And I said, you were what? And she said, I was flying the craft. And I said, they let you fly the craft? I thought she was absolutely nuts. I thought she was lost. I couldn't believe it. In 37 years, I've never heard anything like it in my life. So I said, they let you fly the craft? And she said, yeah, I've flown 3 different models. And I said, so how do you fly craft? And she said, you do it with your mind. And as soon as she said that, I went, oh. And suddenly I realized why they'd set me up to talk to this person. And so I got details from her. How do you do it? Exactly describe how you do it. So what we're putting up on YouTube, and I think there's 1 or 2 are up or just about to go up, I've got a series of about 6 people. So over the years, I've got about 3 dozen plus people who have at some point said, I've flown the craft. And I will say, okay, stop. How do you fly a craft? How do you do it? And everybody says the same thing. You do it with your mind. It's consciousness. It's a consciousness link. And you even go back to, I even show when I lecture, I go back to Cat Stevens, the famous musician. And Cat Stevens, before he became Muslim, lived in London and tells the story quite clearly. He used to lie on the roof of his apartment. And he said that one night a flying saucer flew over. It sucked me up into the flying saucer. And it put me back down. And it was like a dream, but I knew it wasn't a dream. I knew it was real. And even he did 2 songs on this experience. One was called Longer Boats. If you look at that, you just look at the lyrics, you realize it's about his abduction. And the other one he did was the Freezing Steel. He did a song called Freezing Steel. I was on the ship of freezing steel, the ship without the guiding wheel. So even he says there's no guiding wheel. It's done with the mind. And so what I've got coming up on YouTube is a series. And I've got 6 people who I go from start to finish. I say, okay, describe how this is done. And they go through. And we've got Melinda Leslie on there. We've got Susie Hansen, the famous experiencer from New Zealand, who's going to be speaking at UFO Congress next month, talking about the technology she's seen on the craft. She talks about flying the craft. I've got Chris Bledsoe, 5 minutes plus, as he describes exactly what happens inside the ship, how you fly the craft, what you do. I have a number of people. So we're going to put this series. So the consciousness thing is critically important to realize that not only is it flown with the mind, that a lot of experiencers will tell you that the craft itself is conscious. The craft itself is alive. And what you're doing is you're interacting. What you are doing is becoming one with the craft. And once you've interacted with the craft, once you've flown the craft, put your hand on this pad that they describe, and you fly the craft with your mind. At that point, as Chris Bledsoe described to me, then you know when they're there. And this is the famous story that John Alexander tells. As Chris says, that when the craft is in the area, because he's being one with the craft at one point, he knows when the craft is in the area. He doesn't have to see it. He can feel it. It's there. So when John Alexander, you read John Alexander's new book on all the mysterious things he's seen during his life, he tells the one chapter when he goes to Chris Bledsoe, and he said this has really affected him. It really was a traumatic event. He's standing at the top of a hill. I know where this hill was. At the top, they go down the hill, down to the river where this first experience took place with 5 people, with all these aliens, with the crafts landing, and just 14 UFOs, 5 different alien encounters, 5 witnesses. Bizarre thing. They're standing at the top of this hill. He's telling John the whole story, and and they're talking. They're leaning against a car. John Alexander, and he said, "John, I think they're here." And John said, "How do you know?" He said, "They're here. I can feel them. They're here." And John looked up and he said, this thing appeared right above their head and flew off into the distance. And John said, this got his attention. And this is the whole idea that an experiencer will tell you that they know when the thing is, that you'll hear abductees talk about during the day. They know that night they're going to get abducted. They know, they sense, they can tap into this whole thing. So this consciousness thing and the link between them and how they fly the craft and the fact that the craft may be conscious, this is where you got to go. Unless you go there, the trap of the nuts and bolts, and some aliens even say it's a trap. If you go down there, it's a trap. You're never going to get out. You've got to go down this consciousness road. And the government knows about it. And thank God Bob Bigelow knows about it. And they're doing this study on these experiences, because that's the most important part of all the material you're seeing come from the Tom DeLonge operation. I say that consciousness study that they're doing with experiencers is the most important part.
Grant, I couldn't agree more. I think you're dead on in that. And I can't wait to see this new stuff you got coming out on the YouTube channel. And I think there's some pretty interesting times coming ahead. And I look forward to chatting with you again, man. Thank you very much, Grant.
Thank you for your interest. Let's do it again soon.
Appreciate it. Have a good night, Grant. See ya.
Okay.